Man like Mark Sullivan, the warrior self. Stay tuned for the thrilling episode. Woo!
A positive mental attitude can clear away all obstacles which stand between you and your major purpose in life.
This is the Snowboard Project featuring Mark Sullivan and the Bead. The Snowboard Project. The Snowboard Project. The Snowboard Project.
Welcome back to the Snowboard Project. I'm Mark Sullivan.
And I'm the Beav, and kind of a rad day here today. We get we had a pro snowboarder stop in.
Yeah. And that will round out our week nicely because this week is Coulter week. Oh. We have two Coulters this week. This is our second Coulter. Yep. Chris Coulter. Do you know the other Coulter?
I know Coulter Hinchcliffe, the skier.
Nope. Ryan Coulter from the James brand. He designed the Burton bindings for years, and now he runs the James brand, like pocket knives and that kind of thing.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah. So anyhow, this is our second installment of Coulter Week. Where should we start with Chris?
I don't know. Where do you want to start with Chris?
Well, I think
should we ask Chris where he wants to start?
Where do you want to start, Chris?
I don't know.
Okay.
You guys dictate the beginning here.
Okay, so I guess like one of the big subjects to cover in this interview is just basically what it was like to go from being like a contest pro, a guy who's focused on the media, and then making that transition gradually to becoming like a guide, a backcountry professional, and still maintain kind of your status as a professional athlete. How did you like go about making that transition?
Well, I mean, in a lot of ways, I feel like I was kind of forced into it a bit, as far as I still was super passionate about snowboarding, but not finding the support you need to continue along as a pro.
Right.
So, but I still, when I first started snowboarding in my teen years and early 20s, I'm like, yeah, this will be a cool thing to do till I'm 30. Well, get to close to that age around 30 and I'm like, well, but I still want to do this.
Right.
And so through the years of working with different guides and stuff, I kind of got a taste of what that looked like. And randomly I'm on a climbing trip with a friend of mine who's a guide at Silverton Mountain Fabio, and we're like making dinner one night after climbing, and he's like, why don't you work at Silverton? And I'm like, well, you think Aaron would hire me? I don't think Aaron would hire me. And he's like, well, you don't know if you don't ask. So that night I typed up an email in my tent on my phone, and kind of on a whim, not thinking that he would like shut me down. And he responds and he's like, yeah, I'll hire you if you give me a 3-year commitment, so make it worth my time to train you. And that was kind of the beginning of the more formal side of my guiding. I was already working for SAS and for Skylar, kind of as a coach at that point, but yeah, so I mean, and even same thing, like that same year I started working at SEBA, so I was a client there. We had kind of thrown around the idea of me working for them in the past, and then I called them that same year, like, was that for real what you guys were saying, maybe having me be a guide here? And they were like, well, let us think about it. And then they got back to me, and so I kind of fell into it. And it was kind of in a forced way, as far as I was still passionate to ride, but needed to figure out a way to keep my feet on the snow.
Okay, so you get this job. Did you have to go take a bunch of classes? Did you already have those classes under your belt? What did you have to do from the point where he says, okay, I'll hire you if you have a 3-year commitment, to the point where you're actually working?
So I did already have like an AVI 2 and some medical training, and that stuff I just had gotten on my own for backcountry riding, just trying to be responsible to my group that I'm out there with. So I already had kind of the baseline cert you need to guide in the US. So I didn't really need to go and take a class per se, but I did start taking things more serious, studying harder, seeking peer feedback, finding mentors, all that kind of stuff for sure. I definitely started taking all of it way more seriously.
So what's it like going into the backcountry with a group of paying clients versus with a group of your friends?
I mean, in some ways, it's not that much different. It's probably a little easier. Like, you don't have to herd the cats as much, you know. When you're out there with the bros, it seems like everyone goes in 5 different directions, and you got to kind of like have your head on a swivel. I think with a guided group, it makes it a little more formal because you have a designated leader, and so in that sense, it's easier to kind of keep a tighter show. But I always tell all my guests that, like, you know, just because I'm the guide doesn't mean what I say goes. You know, in a backcountry group, everyone's got an opinion. You know, if I'm missing something, or if somebody feels like I'm missing something, I want to hear about it. You know, like, we're all human. We're all prone to making mistakes. So I always try to empower my group to speak up. And if they're uncomfortable with something, I can hopefully either explain why it's okay that we're doing this, or go, I missed something and we're going to make an adjustment and change this scenario.
So were you like the natural born group leader? Like when you were with your buddies, were you kind of like leading the pack, so to speak, and picking the locations and where to go for the day? Or were you just kind of, you know, just another voice in a group of people's voices?
I think I've always been pretty into exploring, and like checking weather and all that kind of stuff. I think back to like days when we were filming and stuff, and to me that was half the fun, is like exploring the new zone. What's the weather going to be like? Trying to time the light and all that stuff. So I've always been really into the planning side of things. I feel like probably a lot of pro riders are into that, you know. Some might depend on the filmers to take care of it, but I've always been into the planning side of stuff. So I don't know. I don't think I've always thought of myself as a leader, but definitely into the dynamic of making a plan and group decision making, you know, really.
Yeah. So what are the biggest challenges as far as now that you're leading groups all the time as a guide? What are the challenges that you face just on a typical day going into the backcountry? I want everyone to come home safe, right? So, and I think one of the biggest things that I started to realize, especially like say in Alaska where the terrain's really big, and also where we're not using explosives or something to mitigate the hazard ahead of getting guests there, is just the consequences, right? It's one thing to decide I'm comfortable with the consequences of skiing this line for myself, and it's a whole another weight thinking I've got these 4 guests coming behind me or in front of me, whatever the scenario is. It's a way heavier weight to deal with deciding if a slope is good for a group than for yourself. Now, are you lead guiding, like going to new locations for the first time, or are you kind of follow guiding where you're landing on an LZ that's already been established and then taking your clients down a run that kind of already been tested, if you will, slope tested?
All kinds of scenarios depending on where I'm working. You know, I've been fortunate to get to work at a lot of different places. So been in lead guide scenarios for sure. And even really early on in my guiding, I was already in that scenario, and getting the opportunity to work with a lot of film crews early on because of my background. So again, it's like, you know, when an athlete decides they want to ski a slope and then you don't get a chance to get out there and do a ski cut or anything like that on it because, you know, they need it to be pristine and beautiful for the shot. So yeah, I mean, right off the bat, I was working with film crews and trying to, you know, make that assessment, whether we think the slope is safe or not. And the first season was very stressful.
Yeah. Do you ever have like athletes who are trying to film a line, let's say, like call it out, or like you're like, I don't know if this is safe, and they're like, nope, this is my line for today, I want to do this?
I've experienced that with a couple of athletes, typically younger ones. I've had the opportunity to work with some very, you know, like snowboard royalty, you know, Xavier De La Rue, Victor De La Rue, these kind of guys. And they are quite the opposite. Those guys are super quick to be like, if I don't feel comfortable, they're like moving on. Yeah. You know, so it is interesting to see like the athletes that are experienced and probably have seen things go wrong. As soon as someone's having a bad feeling, they're like, we're moving along.
Okay, so can you characterize that approach from like the experienced athlete versus the, let's say, beginner backcountry athlete? Like, how do they approach the lines, how they size up a line, and how they know whether it's like going to make a good shot, let's say, for a movie?
I think that's probably the big thing, you know. I've had some scenarios where I'm trying to talk someone out of doing something, and because I'm maybe not 100%, but I also have this approach towards it where I'm not there to keep people from being successful. I'm just there to help. You know, so I try not to shut people down. That's like the last thing I want to do. So I might be like, are you sure this is worth it? Or that kind of thing.
Like you could die. Is it worth it?
Yeah. You know, and so
better be a good shot.
Yeah.
You know, and sometimes I've been in the scenario where I'm not feeling that good, but they're really insistent. They ski it. And then afterwards I'll try to go back and review like, hey, look, the snow quality wasn't as good as we thought it was there. The shot was definitely not a cover shot, was it? And the line didn't work out that good. So was skiing over this 300-foot cliff worth it? Probably not, you know? And I think that's one thing that...
You let them teach themselves.
I mean, that's kind of how we've all had to learn, really, right?
Yep.
You know, I mean, for sure, I was overeager when I was young.
Yeah.
I know that for sure.
Okay, so what gives you pause in the backcountry? What kinds of things are you like scared of, or like kind of put you on your heels as far as guiding groups or even going out by yourself or with a smaller group?
Exposure. You know, I think that's been the big one that I've become more cautious about. You know, like if I'm going to ski an exposed line, snowboard an exposed line, I've got to be really confident that the snowpack is right where it needs to be.
And by exposed, you mean riding over like a big cliff band or over something that
big terrain trap of any sort. Yeah. Right. Like basically where if something goes wrong, the consequences are high. You know, I think I used to be quicker to be like, yeah, let's do that. And now I want to be sure we haven't seen avalanches in several days and that the stars are aligning, you know, to ski those highly exposed lines. You know, I think the older I get, the more cautious I get about doing that.
Okay. So are you going out primarily for in the service of clients or athletes, or are you going out for yourself primarily? Like where's the balance between what you're doing for yourself and what you're doing for other people?
I'm getting more days on snow guiding. But I'm still trying to get those days for myself in, for sure. I think it's important for me to get the days in for myself so that when I am there with the guests, I'm being sure I'm there for them, that I'm not going to try to drag a group into a run that they're not ready for because I haven't, you know, gotten my jollies or whatever lately. You know, so it's like when I'm out on my own, that's the time for me to like ride for myself. When I'm with my guests, I need to be there for my guests.
Okay, so can you characterize what the difference is between being a guide and being a professional athlete? Like, what are the big differences that you find just in your day-to-day life?
You know, I mean, that's going to vary a bit for everyone, but I think big difference for me when I was riding for the camera, it was very much all about me. You know, I was into getting my shot and getting it was very self-centered. You know, and now it's more about the group and being sure the group's having fun, and I'm more in tune with the group dynamics more than I was as a professional athlete.
Okay.
Should we take it back and hear a little bit of his kind of like early years coming up as a professional snowboarder?
Sure.
I think a lot of us would like to know kind of those years just getting into snowboarding and then bringing it up to this level, you know, obviously as a guide, you know.
In Alaska, Chile, a lot of places where you have some of the best terrain and also some of the biggest consequences as a snowboarding athlete.
Sure.
Yeah. So how did you get started snowboarding? Like, how do you even get into it? Because you're from New Mexico, right?
Yeah, I was fortunate that my parents, you know, were taking me on ski trips when I was about 8 years old, and I think when I was 11, I saw a snowboarder ride by, and I was like, "What is that?" Because I was a skateboarder, and I was like, "Dad, what is that? Like, that looks like skateboarding." I should be doing that.
Son, we live near Taos, so that's nothing.
Yeah. So
wasn't Taos? Didn't Taos not allow snowboarding for a number of years?
Yeah. So I've still never snowboarded there. I was skied there a little bit. We used to snowboard there before they opened and hike it.
Okay.
But I still haven't been back.
Right. Yeah. Was that your local hill?
No, actually, Purgatory was kind of where I learned how to ride. I had 8
Four
season
Corners
passes there,
kind of area.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. And so you were 11 years old when you started?
Yep.
And how long did it take you to like become a good snowboarder where you're like, I want to pursue this with my life?
Well, when I was 14, I saw TB4. And that changed my world. I was like, people are snowboarding down mountains like that. Right. That's amazing.
Yeah.
If I could one day snowboard good enough to do that, I would be really stoked.
Okay, so if you saw the terrain first and was like, I need to conquer this, how do I go about doing that? Let's backfill.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so that was a big driving factor for me to try to learn how to ride better.
Okay. And so, but you were still living in New Mexico at this time.
Yep.
And riding Purgatory, was that still your local
Purgatory is where I got to ride if my parents were going skiing. And then when I turned 15, I got my driver's license. And at that point, I started riding in New Mexico a little bit.
Okay.
Where would you ride in New Mexico if you couldn't go to Taos? Where were you ending up?
Sandia Peak, Santa Fe, Los Alamos.
Angel Fire.
I only went there like once for a contest, and I was like, I'm not coming back here. I think it's the flattest mountain in New Mexico.
Okay.
Oh, wow.
But even like way down south, Ski Apache, we used to go all over the state and ride.
There aren't a lot of professional snowboarders out in New Mexico, are there?
Handful. There was the Dector brothers were older than me, and they rode for Burton, I believe.
You remember the Dector brothers?
I can't recall
No?
the Dector brothers.
No?
You remember the Dector brothers, I'm sure.
No, I don't.
Alan and Dougie.
Oh, thanks. I was about to make me feel dumb.
No, I was just teasing.
Just lead me into traps.
Yes, of course. Okay, so you're riding around New Mexico. Is there like a series there, like a contest series?
Yeah, there was a little local contest series. Trevor Patterson was a guy that was kind of running that, and there was actually, he lived up in Ski Rio eventually, as I was getting a little older, 17, he was living up there because they would give him full reign to do whatever he wanted with the Snowcat. So he was building all these crazy gap jumps and putting on these cool slope style contests, and that was really where our New Mexico snowboard clan would get together, and we'd start to meet people from Santa Fe, from Los Alamos, and it was really a cool scene up there because Trevor could build whatever he wanted, and he'd get us all together. We'd have fun. We'd see people doing different tricks, and like, oh, we got to learn that. So it was a cool little scene that we had going on up there in northern New Mexico,
right
at Ski Rio.
Was there an event where you were like, wow, I landed this trick, I landed this thing that kind of just inspired you to take it for, like, I might have a shot at doing this as a profession?
I was pretty fortunate to do fairly well in a lot of our local contests, but I always wanted to be like, I'm fairly competitive, so I always wanted to do better, and there was a lot of pretty good guys. And I think a big thing for me was I was typically fairly good at landing, but my style wasn't that good, so
you had clicker style,
Sullivan style.
It was cool to see some of these guys that had rad style,
right?
A couple guys from Los Alamos in particular that I think helped just, our whole crew really helped push each other. And we had a strong crew of guys from New Mexico that moved to Salt Lake together after high school. And we were all really good for each other. We pushed each other. We helped each other. We lived together to help keep expenses down. We traveled together. I was pretty fortunate to have a tight little crew through my teenage and early 20 years with the New Mexies.
So you guys ended up taking off and going to the Salt Lake area.
Yeah.
Talk to me about some of those people you were with and where you were going, and kind of what was the protocol then after kind of, I guess, exiting New Mexico.
Yeah, so we had a couple older friends who were reps who kind of helped us navigate the industry and supported us through, small sponsorships, getting gear and helping us.
So you were already sponsored when you moved to Utah?
Yeah, I had like a deal under a rep, Jason Bose and Nate Cohn, Tony Perez. Those guys were all always really good to me and our whole crew, really. And they were doing stuff with like Solomon and then eventually Burton. So they, they were really good about being sure we had good fresh gear to ride on and go compete on, and supported our little Nemexi crew.
So when did you get your first like shot published in a magazine, or like your first clip in a video, something like that?
So I had a couple little clips in a 411 that Shane Charlebois shot. That was my first kind of visible video footage. I can't remember exactly my first photo, but it was probably something with like E-Stone. E-Stone and Cole Taylor were real supportive to me, and Shane Charlebois really helped me a lot, in those early years, for sure. Tech 9 was like, one of my first video parts, and Represent. Those guys really helped me get some momentum and get things going,
So you were riding for Tech 9 too, I take it?
Yep.
Okay. I mean, I think most people in the Tech 9 movies were on Tech 9 as well.
Right.
Who were your other sponsors there in those early days as you're starting to get, recognized?
Solomon, Bonfire, and then I guess as that fell through, is those relationships are as good as your connection there. So through team manager changes, that relationship ended, and so I didn't have much. And then I think that's when I started falling in with the Tech 9 guys. Cresceda was giving me some Sims boards. He was like, I can give you boards, but there's not much else I can do for you. So when any other opportunity comes up, take it, but let me support you like this. And right as I was starting to break through, I didn't have anything going really. The Tech 9 guys were giving me bindings, and Chris was giving me boards, and
all the bindings you can strap into.
And my friend Nate was giving me, Forum outerwear, and
sponsored by friends.
Yeah, sponsored by friends. Right as like my early 20s were happening there, and had a little hidden part in Kingpin video Brainstorm.
Yeah.
So that was kind of funny how that worked out. I think Mikey LeBlanc had finished his video part by like early March.
Yeah.
Probably had enough footage for a couple video parts done. And so I had kind of met Shane and Mikey, and I was giving out sponsor me videos to all the pros, and just really trying to get it going. And I think those guys kind of schemed up a plan like, hey, let's shoot Chris, and didn't tell Whitey they were filming me. And so then I think when the film got developed, Whitey's like, who the hell is this? And what is this? And Shane and Mike are like, oh, we decided to film this kid. And Whitey was nice enough to give me a part after the credits, even though there was really nothing in it for him.
Right. You weren't sponsored by one of the sponsors of the video, and therefore you didn't earn, quote unquote, your place in the video.
So, but he still threw me a part after the credits, and that was the same year that the Represent part came out. And so after that, I got to deal with Rip Curl and with Elevation Snowboards, and really started getting some momentum and some support at that point.
So it sounds like, you were doing a lot of legwork to try to get sponsored, but really it was kind of the results of that work that actually ended up getting you sponsored, like getting in those videos and having those things. What is it like to go about trying to get sponsored as you're coming up, you're in your early 20s and you're like, I got what it takes, but no one's listening?
I was working hard at it. I was really passionate about it. And honestly, I was starting to be like, maybe this is not for me, like as far as maybe I don't have what it takes, because no one was getting behind me. Because even after those parts came out, it took a few months before I was starting to get a little bit of a response and some people to talk to. So I was like, what am I going to do? This isn't going to work. But luckily it did work,
Right.
But I was starting to come up with plans. Like I'm going to start my own car detailing business or something.
Right.
I'm 21 years old, not making any money at all, and chasing the snowboard dream that may not be able to happen.
What was your summer? Did you have a summer job where you just went like hammered nails or went
that summer before? Well, I was actually when I was 18, 19, 20, I was down in Australia coaching snowboarding.
Nice.
when I was 21, I had taken that summer off of going to Australia because I was detailing cars, learning about that business, thinking I might start a mobile car detailing business, actually.
Okay. Yeah. So the mobile car detailing business doesn't sound as sexy as being a pro rider. No. Was it like an equal thing, or were you like, thank God I just got sponsored? Thank God
for sure. I was
out.
like, I've put so much of my heart and soul into this, and I just want it to work, And then finally, when Warbs over at Rip Curl was calling me, I'm like, yes, okay, here we go. I can keep doing this because
was that your first paycheck, Rip Curl?
I actually had gotten one from Solomon a couple years before that.
Okay.
I got a small contract, which was really, thinking back, it was like crazy that I got that because I really hadn't done much other than win some like amateur contests. But that was my second paid contract. Yeah.
Okay. And so, but you ended up going on to riding for Elevation, for Sapient, and you ended up getting a pro model. You kind of went to the top as far as like in video parts. I mean, as far as what riders are looking for out of their careers, it seems like you were checking all those boxes as like a competitor, film, video athlete.
Yeah, I feel really lucky for the path I got to go down,
Right.
A lot of support from a lot of good people, put me in a lot of really good places, and just tons of great opportunities.
So how long did that last when you were like just being featured in videos and magazines and that kind of thing? How long did you do that for?
Seemed like it was like right around nine years.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. What was what were some of the highlights of those years traveling the world?
I mean, I think that's it right there. Number one, getting to travel around a lot. I think you can grow a lot as a person, getting to see different cultures, getting to go to like Japan or New Zealand or, different places is always eye-opening. Getting to go to Europe a couple times, that kind of stuff. Getting to hang out with people that I looked up to, like getting to ride with Nicholas or Gigi, getting to watch the way those guys interpret the mountains, and just really seeing that there's like a whole nother level, getting to ride with people like that and go, I'm pretty good, but these guys are really good, and showing me that there's more to practice, there's more to be better at. I learned a lot riding with Marco. He lived in Utah, so I had an opportunity to get to ride with him a little bit, and again, just learn a lot from watching someone who's really at the top of the game do their thing.
Happy holidays, guys. Just want to give a shout out to everybody that has supported us up to this point. We are 50 plus episodes into this project, and it has been a great experiment in snowboarding and snowboarding media, and it has been fun. It has been a great time, hasn't it, Mark?
Yeah, I've had a lot of fun doing the interviews, doing our weekly Real Talk episodes. It has been also a learning experience. It's not only been fun, but it's also been a learning experience.
It's been a huge learning experience for myself as well, just learning about snowboarding, learning just about the industry that I'm directly a part of in an unfiltered kind of way, I guess.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So who are some of the people that have been helping us out thus far?
Okay, so we have guys like Jeff Lavin, Kyle Clancy, Trevor Graves, Kyle Phillips, Jay Quinn's one of our supporters. We have all sorts of people supporting us right now at the Snowboard Project, and so they go to patreon.com/the Snowboard Project, donate $2, $5, $10 or more a month, and just help this independent voice in snowboarding media survive.
So if you're interested in supporting us, and if you're interested in buying us a beer, buying us a couple beers, or really just helping us out, please go to patreon.com/the Snowboard Project and help us keep bringing you an independent voice in snowboarding media.
Now, would you go into the backcountry with those same people?
Yeah, most definitely.
Were they like people who you considered like good backcountry practitioners, or were they kind of like loose cannons, just like, hey, let's go do that. It's cool, let's do it.
I don't think anyone that I ever really rode with was loose. And sometimes, like, I know I've had Kurt like kind of talk to me a few times, Wastel, when I'm eyeing something up, just hungry and maybe a little overly aggressive, him being like, that may not be good right now. And it's great having these guys with more experience to help the guys with less experience to kind of keep them out of trouble. But I think through the years of filming that there really wasn't too many loose scenarios I can think of. While no one was formally educated, I know that everyone took it pretty serious. And we were always looking out for each other and trying to respect the terrain. And back then we weren't really riding like huge lines or anything. So it was mostly like, is this jump below a big slope? Maybe sometimes we had like landings slide, because typically a good landing's a pretty good pitch for an avalanche. Yeah. But those are pretty small pieces of terrain, so typically not huge consequences with a lot of that stuff. So
okay. Have you had a lot of close calls just filming either prior to being a guide or even being a guide?
Well, in 2007, I got caught in a slide behind Brighton, and up to that point, I had an avalanche beacon since I was 15 years old, read a lot of books about snow, thought I knew more than I did. I was overconfident, and that was kind of the beginning of my formal education and seeking mentors and kind of realizing how much I didn't know. So that was a close call. It wasn't a big avalanche, but I think those close calls are what helps motivate us to seek more training and realize what we don't know.
How close of a call was it?
It was a small avalanche, but it was something that was totally avoidable. There was obvious visual clues. There had been a recent natural avalanche cycle and then a storm after that. I was out of town during that period. I hadn't checked the avalanche forecast. So there was a lot of really easy ways that I could have avoided being in that avalanche, paying more attention to the visual clues, checking the report. And then also when I set it off, a quick glance behind me, I would have seen that I set it off and I could have easily rode off to the side and not been in it.
Right.
So I didn't get buried or anything. I was able to ride out of it, but it was, typically when you get caught in an avalanche, there's more than one mistake. And there was easily 3 or 4 mistakes that I made there that led up to that. So.
Okay. And so is that when you started taking actually formalized classes?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, that season I took my first Avi 1, yeah.
Right. And then how long from the time you took your Avi 1 to the time you're like, hey man, I could be a guide?
Let's see, I did an Avi 2 in 2009, and then I think I was down in South America with Marco, and I ran into my friend Skylar, who worked in Colorado.
Skylar Holgate?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
And I was like, oh, what are you doing here? And he's like, oh, we got this whole camp that we're doing. And the snow was tough when I was down there with Marco and Shane. Like, it just didn't snow for like a month.
By tough, you mean shitty?
Yeah.
Okay.
There was lots of snow, but no fresh snow. And we were trying to wait it, but we stayed like a month and it didn't snow. And those guys took off, but I changed my ticket and hung out with Skylar and just started like following him around and kind of mentoring under him and learning more about like, how do you look after a group and manage a group.
Because he was already guiding at this point.
Yeah. He'd already been working at Silverton, and he was doing this thing with SAS, and he was running their snow safety. And so I hung out with him for another couple weeks, and then went back down the next season with Vans. And then at that point, that next year, I lost all my endorsements, and I hit those guys up and asked for a job coaching for SAS.
Okay, so basically you fell off the sponsorship bandwagon or wagon, and we're like, okay, I got to figure out how to stay a snowboarder, and here's a path.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Talk about that moment, like the moment where you're like, oh, I'm not on the team anymore. I'm not getting that paycheck.
Yeah, any cold breaks, anyone that you were like kind of mad at that they broke up with you wrong?
No, not at all. I mean, what goes up must come down. At the time, it was a little rough. I will say that the nicest break was from the Vans guys. They gave me 6 months notice, which I thought was very cool.
Yeah.
Some other brands let me know 2 months after the renewal was supposed to happen, and you know how things are in the industry. Sometimes they happen a little later than others. So I was still kind of hoping maybe this is going to happen.
Right.
And then it's like, no, that's not going to happen. But it was interesting how the thing that hurt is when I lost it, I lost all of it at once.
like on May 1st, all your deals came up, and then it's like, nope, we're not renewing.
Yeah.
Nope, we're not renewing. Oh, did we say we were going to renew? No, we didn't actually.
So it was like going from like everything's easy to like, oh boy,
Right.
how am I going to pay my bills?
Did you have a moment where you're like, car dealership, or car detailership, or whatever? Like,
No, I think at that point I was still like, I'm going to pretend like I'm still a pro snowboarder, and I'm going to get contracts again.
okay.
So you were in denial, basically.
I was in denial.
Okay.
Yeah.
So how long were you in denial
Not the
for
river.
until you were able to get your next sponsor?
Right.
I think it was like 3 years.
3 years without a sponsor.
Wow.
Okay. So what was that
At least
like?
3 years without a paying sponsor,
Right.
like,
But were you filming for movies still? Were you getting out in front of cameras? I mean, how were you being a pro if you didn't have sponsors or maybe those media outlets?
I had hooked
Right.
up with Nico and the Levitation guys, and
Right.
I was selling every single like toy or thing that I had that I that wasn't necessary. Mostly motorcycles, and throwing heli time on credit cards and getting out and trying to get photos and stuff. I mean, we were out shooting with Levitation, and that was kind of an interesting time because this was right about the time where I remember, like, it used to be you go out and get your shot, but you don't want anyone to see that because maybe the magazines are going to run it, you know? And so this was like, we were going out in Alaska in Haines and go get a shot and come right home and throw it on Facebook that day. This was today. This was the best shot of the trip, and we're throwing it on Facebook today.
Right.
Right.
And so that was kind of cool because I feel like that was a little bit of the beginning of like the strength of what social media is now,
Right.
Some would say the beginning of the end.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
beginning.
people, I remember people were tripping on us like, you guys just threw that photo on Facebook? What the F are you doing?
Right.
And we were just like, well, I don't know. I mean, what does it matter? I don't have any sponsors.
No one else is
Right.
printing it, so
Yeah.
what do you care?
Yeah. So that was kind of fun, actually.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's interesting because really, I mean, the whole world has come into this like instant gratification, free media, free movies, free everything now. And I think that was probably the beginning of it.
Yeah.
Right.
And that was super fun. I mean, I was getting that trip in particular is one I'll never forget. Getting to ride with Wyatt Caldwell and just super fun to finally be up there in Alaska, a place that's like really close to my heart, and getting to free ride and not like try to build jumps or something. That was one of my first trips where I really did just get to free ride and start trying to hone those skills that I wanted since I was 14 years old,
Right. Had you been to Alaska already?
I had been a few times. Yep.
But it was more for these kind of like film projects where it's very specific what you're going for.
Yeah, I mean, when you're up there with like I was up there with Absinthe, and it's like they're breaking the crews up into the line crews, the kicker crews, and I absolutely loved getting to work with those guys, and it was a huge opportunity. But I feel like sometimes I was getting shuffled into the jump crews when I love to jump, but if I want to build a cheese wedge, I'll do that in Whistler or Colorado or
Right.
somewhere else. But Alaska to me is like, let's ride some lines. Yeah.
Right. So you were on the kicker crew, but you wanted to be on the line crew.
Yeah.
And everyone would come home at the end of the day and they'd be like, oh, I did this line. I did this line. You're like, I shoveled a cheese wedge all day.
Yeah. and the first year I was up there too was like bad Avalanche cycle. Every film crew that was stepping anything was setting off slides. And
Right.
I know we waited it out longer than any other film crew, but it still just never got to that point, And also, if you want to go ride with someone like Jonathan Moore, you got to prove that you can handle the kind of terrain that he's going to step to. So I also understand that, like, you don't just plug the rookie in to go ride with Jonathan.
Right.
I mean, I get that as well.
Yeah. Okay. So you're doing, you're up there with Absinthe filming. You'd already had a couple of parts with Absinthe already? Or was it your first year filming with Absinthe that you got to go to Alaska?
Yeah, my first year that I was shooting with Absinthe, I did go up there, but I opted to not go for heliskiing because I was having a shoulder problem that season. I hurt it really bad at the beginning of the season, and any bad crash, it would dislocate, come out of socket. I even kind of like ruined a heli trip in Canada. Like the best day, I dislocated my shoulder at the beginning of the day. The crew had to get pulled out of the field. We didn't get much footage because we had to take.
Right, you were the weak link.
Yeah, so I opted to not go. I could have gone heliskiing with them the first season, but I didn't want to ruin an expensive day for people. So I drove up with sleds and met Brandon Ruff and Kurt Wastel up there in May. They had already done the heli season, and then we did some more sledding, and Shane was our filmer, Charlebois.
Okay.
And so that was my first trip to Haines.
Was that the same year you did like the biggest half pipe air ever? Not really so much out of the half pipe, but over it?
That was the same season, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
What was that like? Because you actually jumped over the half pipe. How did that come about?
That was really cool. I mean, I got to ride with Bjorn. You know, he's always been someone I looked up to. So that aspect of it was really sick. The ski crew had already established the jump, you know, and invited Bjorn and I to come up and hit it. And so
Where was this?
This was at Snowbird.
Okay.
And so the first day we went up, we were using a radar gun back then for a lot of the gap jumps. And so we already knew how fast the skiers were having to go.
How fast?
I think at the compression, it was something right around 60 or 70 miles an hour.
Oh, just 60 or 70.
Just 60 or
right?
70.
Jump.
I mean, it's been a long time ago. My memory is not the best, but it was something like that. But the in run for those guys was basically a mogul field, and then they had smoothed it out from about the compression on. And so Bjorn and I were trying to get the speed, and we couldn't do it through the mogul field. So the first day was chop the moguls down with our boards and smooth out an in run for us and get to where we could get the speed going.
Okay.
You know, and then the other really cool thing about that session is they had set up this like cable for a filmer to be traveling across the half pipe with us, which also made that video shot like really unique.
Cool.
Right. Yeah.
Cool. That sounds like, I mean, that was one of the more memorable shots from your early career anyway, as far as like that really stood out. It's like, you want to see a big air in the pipe. How about we just go over the pipe?
Yeah, especially when you can't ride half pipe. That's a good way to do it.
Yeah. So how many days were you filming that? How many days did it take you to actually get the cojones to go for the jump? How long did that take?
I mean, at that point, you know, it's like that was in April. We were tuned up on our riding. As soon as we knew we had the speed, you know, I think it was like the first hit, you might be a little intimidated, but once each of us hit it once, I think we were just like, heck yeah, this is fun.
Who was the guinea pig, you or Bjorn?
Oh, I can't remember.
Okay.
I wish I could remember that.
Okay.
That would be a good question for Bjorn. I bet he remembers.
Yeah. Okay. So you jumped to half pipe. Was your favorite video part? What was your favorite video part that you filmed for?
That one might be one of my favorites. It's hard. I feel like I always wanted more, you know?
Yeah.
I always tried to be pretty selective though too. My mindset was don't overdo it. Don't put any weak shots in there. Keep people wanting more. So I think a lot of my video parts were shorter, but I tried to keep them strong and keep people wanting more was kind of my mindset towards them. But I always wanted more for myself. I always expected more out of myself. I don't think I was ever happy with the video part really.
Okay. So
3 years, you went 3 years without a sponsor. You were still filming, you were still shooting photos, throwing them up. The world is kind of changing. How did you rein that back in? How did you bring that, I guess, some money back into your life as a snowboarder?
Was it a video clip? Was it your Facebook presence? Was it your Instagram followers? What got you your new sponsor after 3 years?
Yeah. Or was it just like a new kind of way to make money in snowboarding?
I think it was like kind of coming at it from a little different angle somewhat. I mean, I already knew that I was, after like going 3 years without much support, it was already like, okay, well, time to start figuring other stuff out. You know, I was through that time, I was splitting a lot of boards and making split boards for people, especially women, because back then there was no split boards made for women, and not that many split boards in general, and a cheaper way to do it was split boards. So that was one hustle I had on the side and something I enjoyed and I could do on my own time in my garage to help see me through the season. But as far as getting another sponsor going, you know, I was riding in Alaska again with Wyatt Caldwell another season, and we're up there with Levitation, and our guides had Eddie Bauer outerwear, and we were like, oh, Eddie Bauer makes outerwear. Interesting. We didn't know that. And we're like, what's the deal? Like, are you...
Eddie Bauer's got money.
Yeah. Right. And we were like, do they have snowboarders? And the guys were like, no. And Reggie Christ was our guide, and we're like, do you have any extra jackets or pants we can wear? And so we got clothes from him, and neither Wyatt or I had an outerwear thing going. We were both riding snowboards. So, you know, David was supporting us in that way, giving us boards to ride and stuff. And even giving us an avenue of a place to put our footage in one of the movies, which was really cool, those guys. But we didn't have any support. Wyatt and I were both just floating this out of our own pockets, which is, that's fine. And we got the outerwear, got some photos, and then we started communicating with their marketing department, being like, this is snowboarding, this is us snowboarding in your clothes.
It's not super loud. It doesn't scrape all the snow off the mountain. We promise.
And it took us a good year of communicating with those guys before we got them to be like, all right, let's do this.
Right. And then you're back to being a pro, because Eddie Bauer, I imagine, pays. They give you clothes, they give you opportunities to film and do other things.
I mean, it's interesting, like, to think about what is a pro. You know, what makes someone a pro? I don't know. To me, I've always kind of thought about it like you're in a place where you can dedicate yourself 100% to your activity.
Right.
So I wouldn't say that took me back to being a pro, but it did put me in a position where I had a little more freedom and I was a little less financially stressed. You know, it wasn't like a big contract, but it was a little something.
Right.
To help keep us going and keep us motivated. And they make great gear. So, you know, not having to spend money on gear and stress out about that's money you're saving. And it also motivates you when you know you've got someone behind you. I think it helps motivate you to keep pushing.
Right. So did the other sponsors, because I know you ride for Jones and Spark R&D now, did the other sponsors just fall into line after the Eddie Bauer deal came up, or did it take another few years to get all these other sponsors to come together to kind of make a whole package?
Yeah, they slowly kept trickling along. I think the Jones thing kind of came up because I was trying to get the guys to do a split board, and because they're kind of really closely related with Jones, that they felt like that didn't make sense. And I was split boarding so much at that time that I was like on a Venture split board and a snowboard, and it was like kind of a muddled message, I felt like.
Yeah.
So I approached Jeremy because I thought it would be good to be able to be on the same board, whether I was split boarding or snowboarding. And you know, I'm so lucky that he's down to support me. Like, you know, again, just like through my whole career, feel just super lucky to have people like that get behind me, you know? And so I think that a lot of my relationships now, I don't look at them like, I consider myself more of an ambassador than like a pro rider.
Okay. And by that, you mean what? What's the difference between a pro and an ambassador?
Well, I mean, it's not about a paycheck, and it's more about me just representing the brand in a good way and being like a positive person who supports snowboarding and wants to help other people get out and snowboard. And I'm using products that I believe in, and that I can honestly tell someone, yeah, I think you should use this product because I believe in it.
Sounds like the ambassador gig is a little sweeter than the pro gig.
It's been pretty nice.
Yeah. Okay. So what are the challenges of now being in your 30s, being a quote unquote sponsored snowboarder? What are the biggest challenges to keep that going, to keep you yourself in front of the media, or to be present enough where your sponsors see that as like a good investment?
Well, I think, you know, at this point, the social media thing's getting really strong. So in a lot of ways, it's like, it's almost easier, right, than it used to be, because you don't have to get accepted into a production and raise the funds to pay to be in that production to stay relevant. Now you can create your own relevance through your social media avenues, and that's just being, I mean, you just have to be a little motivated to do that, right? Snap a couple photos, get your buddies to take a photo of you. and try to post currently. I mean, I'm not as good at it as I should be, but it's also not that hard to do that stuff a little bit, you know.
So you get like a ton of followers through Eddie Bauer or whatever. So now you have 100,000 people following your every move.
No, not really. I'm not even close to that on my followers, but I do think that the people that follow me online are probably really relevant. You know, I don't have a lot of followers, but I know a lot of my followers, and the ones I don't know are probably people that are really into snowboarding.
Right. Okay. So what are your plans for this season? What are you going to do? I know you just finished an Avalanche course here in Sun Valley. What was that? And then what are your plans for the season this year?
Slight change up for the season. I'm going to go to Japan next month. I haven't been there in a long time, so I'm super excited about that. And then I'll be back in Colorado for February, March, probably the first week of April. I don't know for sure if I'll be doing Alaska this spring. I think I've been going to Alaska the last 12 years in a row. Mm-hmm. So hopefully I'll find my way up there. It's definitely a place I'm really passionate about. But yeah, Silverton Mountain is definitely where I'll be for the main part of the winter.
So you guide there?
Yeah.
Like on a day-to-day basis? How does that work?
Guide and patrol there. One thing that I really love about working there is it's one of the only places that allows snowboarders to do legit patrol work, you know, and get out and run control routes. Most places don't believe that snowboarders can pull that kind of work off. So I feel really fortunate to get to be there and experience that, because I think a great way to learn how to avoid avalanches is to see them initiated.
Right.
So that's like a learning experience that's hard to get, especially as a snowboarder.
Okay. So what is Silverton like? I mean, I think that Silverton has this mystique among resorts where it's like, it isn't your typical resort.
Have you not been to Silverton?
I haven't.
Solely?
No.
I forget of all people you probably would.
No, I haven't. Okay. But
Sorry.
I would go. I hear it's awesome. But I want you to basically characterize what makes it different from Baker
so
or
it's
from somewhere
absolutely
else.
not a ski resort. It's a snowboarding mountain. We let skiers come up too, though.
Okay, good. Well, maybe not.
Do they look at it as a snowboarder's mountain? Like we are a snowboarder's mountain.
Well, it's owned by snowboarders.
It is.
Okay.
You know?
So if Lindsey Vaughn shows up, what do you tell her?
I don't know what they would tell her about. I'm sure they would let her up. You know, we don't discriminate there.
Okay.
But it's not a ski resort at all, right? We have a tent with a bar. We have a chairlift. It's an old mammoth chairlift. The chairlift goes from.
Does that have a bar too?
Technically, I do think at the top of the chairlift can be made into a bar.
Okay.
But the only bar is at the bottom.
I was just thinking safety bars, but you know, it's okay.
Safety bars.
But yeah, so we've got one chairlift, but through that chair, we're accessing 1,800 acres of terrain. So you can ski off either side of the mountain, to the east or to the west. Lower down on the ridge, you can ski to the north. So the chair tops out right at about 12,000 feet. We can hike up to 13,400. And there's just tons of terrain that you're accessing off that one chair. We have shuttle vans and buses that bring you back to the base, depending on where you come off, because you don't ski right back to snowboard right back to the chair. And then we also have a A-Star B3E, basically the best helicopter for heliskiing.
Right there.
And a huge permit with over 20,000 acres for heliskiing. So it's a super unique operation. There's nothing like it in the U.S. It's super unique. You know, I ended up working there because I fell in love with it as a rider. And found myself frequently going down there to ride because I love the guide staff. I love the vibe of the place, and it's just super unique.
What's a typical day at Silverton? I mean, are there thousands of people there? Are there hundreds of people? Is it?
Yeah, like 100 people.
100 people.
You know, over 100 people is like a busy day there. It is, you know, the one storm and we're skiing powder for a week, easy, on track POW. You know, I mean, it's a cool, unique place, and it's
okay.
And they run just a bus shuttle that just picks up every 20 minutes somewhere, and you just bring it back.
Yeah. And so during our unguided season, you're going to see more people than that.
Sure.
The unguided season's short, and it's at the end of the year. We used to have it at the beginning and the end. Right now, the current status is that it's at the end of the season. But a typical day is, you show up, you check in.
Because you have to be guided on that mountain.
Right? Yeah. And if you don't know the mountain, I think it's great to go up and get guided at least once, even if you are very experienced,
Sure.
Local knowledge is everything, no matter where you are, so. But a typical day there is you show up, you check in, you get your ticket. We break up the groups to ability level. So we talk to people in the morning in the parking lot. We ask them, if they want to hike hard, if they want to ski hard.
Right.
And
So you're an expert. What kind of expert are you? A double black diamond expert? A triple black diamond expert? Right. It's like when you go heliskiing, everyone's an expert. Right. Everyone thinks they're an expert anyway.
Yeah, and it humbles people for sure up there because it's high elevation, So if you've come from sea level and you're
not hiking,
the hiking will beat you down quick when you're not acclimated.
Right.
Yeah.
So what's the difference between like helicopter skiing in Alaska and Silverton?
Well, it's a completely different snowpack.
Yeah.
So the depth of the snowpack and the amount of rocks and stuff, obviously, the rocks don't get covered up as easy in Colorado. The elevation is way different again. And, we're taking people up to 13.4. Typically in Alaska, we're skiing maybe around 6,000 or 8,000 feet. Yeah. We can get higher in the Trodillos, up to 11,000 feet and stuff, but that's rare.
Right.
So, but the big difference is the snowpack, right? The maritime snowpack in Alaska sticks to really steep slopes, so there's more slough management you're dealing with. It's Alaska's kind of its own beast. Right. I feel like. I mean, that.
Yeah.
Mark,
how would you describe Alaska to people compared to other places you've been?
Yeah, I mean, it's its own thing, and like I hear a lot of people say like, "Oh, I'm trying to build up to get ready for that," and it's like if you're a strong rider, you're ready for it.
Yeah.
Like you don't have to go right to the Death Nar spines, and you're not going to get taken right to the Death Nar spines. So
yeah.
Right. I always tell people you need to get up there as soon as possible because I know for me it was a mind warp showing up there. It's a different deal. You really need to work your way up. I think there's very few people that have shown up there and ripped it right away. You know, handful of people. Most of us, it takes years of practicing and wrapping your mind around.
Right.
How to
And
ride
those people
mountains.
who do rip when they show up, they spent years in the BC backcountry or in Europe or somewhere riding big lines, basically.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I think BC is a great training grounds for it because it's super similar snowpack, steeps, maybe just not quite as long usually. But yeah, like the little bit of time I've got to spend in Whistler is it's similar to Alaska.
Right. So you find after 12 years of going to Alaska that your blood runs a little bit colder now as far as like being able to mitigate the fear or the nerves that you might feel on top of big mountains or big runs. Is it easier now?
Yeah, it's not as stressful for sure. But that's the thing, there's still always that bigger, steeper, more exposed run if you want it. I mean, you can always still get that kind of butterflies in your stomach feeling very easily there.
Hey, Beef.
Oh, what's up there, Sully?
I just wanted to tell you about editorial in advertising-free media.
We've been talking about this for a while.
Yeah, pretty much since the beginning of the snowboard project.
Since the beginning of time.
Yeah.
It's kind of been the foundation of what we've been working off of, right?
Yeah, and so basically we've been trying to keep the advertising and the editorial separated at the snowboard project.
Now, advertising as in like advertising sponsorship, right? We throw our little things in the mix.
Yeah, and so basically what we're looking for are our listeners to support us with $2 a month, $5 a month, $10 a month to support advertising-free snowboarding media. And what that means is that our voice will not be affected by brands, by advertising, and we'll just have an independent voice tell you exactly what we think.
Now, it is possible that we could take like some non-endemic sponsorship, or are we talking like in the snowboard realm?
Yeah, I mean, the idea is that we use the support of our listeners to basically fund the snowboard project and keep our voice independent. And not really influenced by any kind of moneyed interest whatsoever.
So we basically need to rely on our listeners
Yes.
to go to patreon.com/the snowboard project and be willing to buy us a beer or 2 beers or maybe a case of beer.
Yeah, that would be cool.
That would be awesome. Patreon.com/the snowboard project.
Do you ever see any guides just getting too comfortable, taking for granted what the real risks are out there? Because I've seen some guys in the Valdez area who I've seen make the biggest mistakes. The guys who are supposedly the most experienced are actually the guys making the biggest mistakes.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a bit of human nature, to get complacent and get to I have never seen this run slide. Been skiing here for 10 years, snowboarding here for 10 years. Right. You probably have noticed I have a habit of saying ski.
Yeah.
Most of my clients end up being skiers these days, so that's a bit of a habit I've developed. But the complacency thing is human nature, I feel like. So I think that we're all prone to doing that, and I think that anyone who's guiding has probably done that. And part of becoming a more experienced guide is learning how to recognize that and combat these human characteristics. We're all super prone to making mistakes.
Yeah.
I think when we're trying to ride or run, we're going to look for more reasons why we should do it than why we shouldn't. And I think as a good guide, you're constantly hunting for reasons why you shouldn't do something. Right. Is it that someone in the group isn't capable? Maybe your whole group, except for one person, is ready for that run. So you can't do it because you got one person that's not ready. Right. That's something that I'm constantly trying to work on as a guide, is like learning just that, learning how to find reasons not to do something, being ready to say no. Do
you have to shut a lot of people down from runs where they're like, oh, I can do that one, and you're like, no, I've seen you ride?
A lot of times I think it's more that not their ability level, but it's the timing. People have this week, they've saved a lot of money, they're spending a lot of money to do this trip, right, and they want to get the run of their life, and we want to give that to them, but the timing's everything. Every run's got its day. Sure. But for someone who's spending day in, day out in the snow, it's easy to be patient. But when you've got people that are working really hard and saving their money, and this is their big trip. So yeah, I get a lot of people, not so much on a production level, because those people tend to have more time to put in. Right. So they can kind of wait for that right day. But when you've got people that are just there for the short week and they're pointing at the run across the way and they want to ski that, you do have to like kind of explain to people a lot, like, I don't think today's the day for that. And it's not that we don't want people to get that opportunity. It's just that our job is to bring everyone home safe.
So
that's
you break
number one priority.
You break the news easily. You're not like, oh, the helicopter can't fly up there today.
Yeah, I mean, you try to be as honest with people as possible. And a lot of times when you're in that kind of a regime where the snowpack is not stable, there's typically natural or skier triggered avalanches that you can point out and be like, see that? See that? That's why we're not going up there.
Right. There have been a handful of fatalities in like the Haines area. Have you been around during any of those?
Yeah, I mean, all those people are friends of mine, so that really hits home super hard for me.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, and I mean, yeah, it's super tough. I've been close enough to some of that stuff that it's definitely made me question continuing to do this kind of work. And ultimately, it just came back to this is what I'm good at and what I know how to do, and I just want to keep going with it.
So what's the biggest moments that's given you pause? Is it just one of your personal friends getting caught up in an avalanche or something like that?
Yeah, for sure. Because when it's all said and done, it's just snowboarding, and it's not worth losing friends over, and so when that happens several times, you really start kind of questioning everything. And so I think some of that stuff has helped me to also learn how to be more conservative and say no.
When you look back at those events, do you look back and you can see what mistakes were made immediately, like they jump forward to you? Or is it more like, okay, we did every precaution we could and it was just Mother Nature having the final say?
Right.
I think it's pretty easy after accidents happen to go back and find mistakes. It's a lot harder to prevent those mistakes from happening. I guess it's tricky to recognize your mistakes when you're in it. Right. But that's where like training and teamwork comes in, and like being able to call out your coworkers or have that conversation with people. And that's where I feel like a lot of the changes or advances in snow in a lot of the courses, you're hearing a lot of talk about human factors and things like that. And it's just learning how to communicate and learning how to detach from the situation and try to find out, what am I missing in this picture? But yeah, you can, almost every accident, you could probably go back and find some mistakes, and we definitely try to do that from a learning perspective. It's not that we want to try to call people out. It's more like we want to not repeat mistakes, and we want to learn from mistakes and not continue down the path of losing friends,
Okay, so I think there's probably a lot of kids out there who are sponsored riders, pros, whatever, and they're trying to figure out kind of what's going to happen when they turn 30 and the sponsors evaporate. Right. What kind of advice? Sounds like you've been through some ups, some downs, some all-arounds. What advice do you have for kids who are kind of trying to make a life, to make a career out of snowboarding beyond just that short window of hitting booters and being featured in movies?
Well, one thing I know for me, I could have probably stopped hitting jumps when the landing was bombed out a few times so that my body would feel a little better.
Okay.
I think that if you take care of your body, there's no reason why you can't continue a strong pro career well into your 30s. So knowing when to go and when not to go, I think, is a huge thing. And that might be the difference of, an injury that could injure a career early, or not having that injury and having a longer career.
Okay, so warning signs, when not to go.
Yeah, like when the landing's bombed out and you can't confidently hit a fresh piece of POW, maybe it's time to cut your losses and wait for the next jump or whatever,
Okay.
And then just planning ahead, and then I think for some people, maybe transitioning into a career that's not on the snow is fine. For me, that wasn't fine. I needed to stay on the snow. And I think guiding is a great way to stay on the snow. So if that is something that someone's into, they can set themselves up for that by already starting some courses and some formal education before they're done snowboarding. And I really think that if you are into backcountry riding, you should already be doing some of those courses anyway.
Right.
And hopefully getting your sponsors to pay for them.
Yep. So what are the courses that you need to take to the point to where you're going to be a professional guide? Like, what courses do you take?
A lot of that stuff is kind of changing now. The baseline used to be the Avalanche 2. Now it's the Avalanche Pro 1, which is like totally obtainable for even anyone who's like a recreational skier, So you got your partner rescue course, your Avi 1, and I believe that's where the split is. I don't think you have to take your Avi 2 rec before you do the Pro 1, but you might. But it's basically just a workflow of a rescue course, an Avi 1, an Avi 2, or the Pro 1. And I mean, if you do either the rec 2 or the Pro 1, that's a lot of information. And you should do a year gap in between doing your one and your Avi 1 and your next course, probably just so you've got some time to absorb it. And then also, if you're out in the backcountry with your buddies, you should probably get a woofer. I mean, I've probably dealt with more injuries as a pro rider than I have as a guide. So you see a lot of injuries when you're out there charging the way that.
Right. You ever gotten any close calls just by someone getting hurt, and then you're sledding 10 miles back and you're like, wow, you got a broken arm. You can't even hold the grips.
Oh, yeah. Or a broken leg for sure.
All kinds of scenarios. Do you carry like a sat phone, or how do you deal with that?
Back in the day, we didn't. We just try to know where your last piece of cell phone coverage is, in case you need to call in a helicopter or something. But yeah, sat phone's a great idea. These days we got like InReach, spot devices. You should be carrying all that kind of stuff for sure. Right. Especially if you're a pro rider or aspiring pro rider and you're spending a lot of time in the backcountry. These are all things, you know, I always say luck favors the prepared. So it's like, let's get ready.
Cool.
Now, you were out here this week, obviously for a class. What was that course?
It was a Avalanche Pro 1. So
Avalanche Pro 1. Yeah,
so they just changed up kind of the format of the education in the US here, and so that's a new course that was offered, and I'm always trying to do continued education and update my training, and there was a bunch of my friends taking the course and teaching it, so it was a great opportunity to get to do that.
What were some of the differences and things that you guys covered this instead of like an Avi 2 or
This is a little more geared towards operational stuff.
Okay.
So meetings, documentation, communicating amongst the whole network of Avalanche forecasters, other guide operations, trying to speak a common language. Just more operational kind of based.
So did you sit in the front row or did you sit in the back row with your buddies?
Did you copy off of Wyatt or Spencer?
It was awesome because we all really helped each other learn a lot, you know?
Yeah.
It's great to, you know, other people ask questions sometimes that I wouldn't ask, where I'm like, oh, wow, that is a great question. And I learned a lot from that. Or, studying with these guys was super fun, you know, and these are guys that I get out in the backcountry with, who are friends of mine. So it's also inspiring.
Wait, those guys know how to study?
It's inspiring to see them like stepping up and taking this course, you know, and they did really well, you know, and it just makes me that much more confident to want to get in the backcountry with them.
Okay, so out of all those guys in that class, which one are you least likely to go into the backcountry with?
No, I'd go with all of them, but I will say that Chase Josie, I think, had the strongest result on the written test.
Ooh,
wow.
So
coming 24 hours off of like his Dew Tour win, and he comes into this situation.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So if there's any kind of practical tests in the backcountry, Josie's your guy.
All right.
Yeah. Right.
And
how did
Wyatt?
Where did Wyatt land?
Well, everyone did really well.
They did.
Everyone did really well.
That sounds very politically correct.
Yeah.
Right.
I don't believe you.
No, they did. Everyone in the crew did really well. It was impressive, actually.
Wow.
Because it was, I wouldn't say that it was at all easy.
Right.
All of us were a little stressed.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So is that a lot harder than your typical Avi 1, Avi 2 recreational, the Avi 1 Pro?
Yeah, I would say it's more challenging than the because it's a pass fail, you know, and I think the rec track is not about pass fail.
No,
so
it should be.
So it adds a little bit of extra stress to it.
Right.
Okay, but you passed.
Yeah.
Did you get an A or did you get a D?
On my written, I barely did get an A, and I don't have all my test results back yet.
All right.
That's good to know. So looking back on this pretty expansive career, is there anything you do differently? I mean, you've had a full career of ups and downs, and like you fell out of sponsorship for 3 years and now you're back. What would you do differently?
I don't know if I'd do anything differently, because everything that I did brought me to here, and I'm really stoked with where I am right now. I feel super lucky. It'd be easy to go back and pick a couple moments where I hurt myself and be like, go faster or don't go or whatever.
Right.
But no regrets, you know. Super lucky and blessed to have done what I've been able to do, and so thankful for all the people that supported me, for sure.
So 10 years from now, what are you going to be doing? The same thing? Something different? What do you think?
If my body will hold out, I'll still be snowboard guiding.
Okay. And where can we find you guiding from time to time? I know you work at Silverton in the summer in Chile.
Yep. So Skylar and I started doing sled Chile 100% 2 years ago. We've been working on it for 5 years. It's a super cool operation, super unique.
How does that work?
So our kind of ideal product is we're taking 4 guests out with 4 drivers, and we're just hot lapping them on sweet runs. And, you know, like a super ideal day, they're crushing like 20 pow lines.
Okay. How much does that cost for a day?
Well, we mostly sell weeks, and it's just shy of the $5,000 for the week. Right. We can probably do day trips if we're not already working a week trip at that point. But the week trip, that includes your food, lodging, guiding, sleds, everything. We can absolutely do day trips if we're not booked.
Right.
Is sledding a pretty big thing down there in Chile? Or is this now?
It's pretty new and it's kind of blowing up, but there are not a lot of snowmobiles in Chile. So there's not a lot of competition in our zone. We're kind of the only people out there. Other people we run into are our friends, or friends of our boss, Cesar. So it's a really cool, unique operation, and that's definitely where I'll be for the next several summers.
Right. Was it hard getting the sleds down there?
Well, luckily, Chris Brandt, who's a professional snowmobiler, was doing an operation there, and our boss, was kind of giving him the lodging and the food, and so we've got a great line on sleds. We send a couple new sleds down every year. We'll buy a couple new ones and send them down. We also have snow bikes down there, and we're trying to update our sleds every year, so we don't have if the sleds are a couple years old, we're selling them and keeping fresh sleds so that we're not dealing with reliability issues when we're out shredding with people. But yeah, it's pretty cool. It's unique, and I think people really enjoy it. In some ways, I almost think it's kind of cooler than heliskiing, because we're not as dependent on weather, and it's just easy to hot lap. And if one person's tired and they want to sit out and run, it's not a big deal, So it's
I was like the adventure of just getting on the sled next to somebody and ripping up, a few thousand feet.
Yeah,
that was like half the fun.
And that's the thing too. If people want to drive sleds or learn how to drive sleds, whatever people can dream up, if they can afford it, we want to accommodate. So we want to help people have a good time and enjoy the mountains safely. That's kind of our thing, is just to help people have a good time out there. Yeah.
Should we do some threes, Sully?
Sure.
Yeah.
Let's do them.
All right.
What do you got?
You hit the threes first.
Okay. Who are your three favorite people to ride with? You could ride with anybody, living or dead.
Well, I mean, one of my favorite snowboarders right now is Manuel Diaz. He just blows my mind. So I think to get to watch him ride could be really cool.
Did you get to guide him in Alaska?
I haven't got to guide him. And then obviously, like, I've had the opportunity to get to be around the De La Rue brothers. I'm going to kind of group them into one person, even though they're very different. But I've learned a lot getting to be around both those guys. It's funny to be like, I guided Xavier. It's like, well, is he guiding me, or how is that working? But like, I've learned a lot by getting to be around him and have a lot of respect for him and his choices in the mountains. And then Skylar Holgate's one of my main backcountry partners. I spent a lot of time with him and learned a lot from him, and he's one of my favorite riding partners for sure.
Okay. Three favorite places to ride.
Yeah. Alaska is definitely one of my favorite places to ride. Silverton, Colorado, definitely one of my favorite places to ride, and sled Chile.
Okay.
Nice.
Okay. I got one more. Three favorite boards that you've ever ridden. Or three favorite boards.
I'm loving the Explorer Jones board. It's kind of soft and playful. I just love that board. I ride it as my split and my normal board. Groundswell Snowcraft Pow Surfers.
Okay.
Love pow surfing. It helps me take a mellow run and make it super exciting. And the hovercraft.
Okay.
All right.
Keeping it kind of current.
Yeah.
Three favorite movies non-snowboarding. We'll just go into one that's not snowboarding here.
Three favorite movies. World's Fastest Indian.
Okay. And
what other movies? I like the Long Way Around. It's kind of not really a movie, it's a series, but I'd like the...
These are like motorcycle films.
It's kind of funny because it's kind of nerdy, like motorcycle adventure.
That's the one with
a lot of hardcore motorcycle adventure people will probably talk crap on that movie, but I think it's just showing anyone can go out for an awesome adventure.
Right.
And that the only thing that's keeping you from doing something like that is maybe your fear of committing to doing something, you know, because those guys are like stars and they did this crazy adventure.
Right. That's the one with who's the movie star that's
Ewan
in it?
McGregor?
Ewan McGregor.
Yeah. And another movie, probably Billy Madison.
Yes.
Okay, that's a good one.
All right.
Okay, so this is kind of by elimination, but worst 3 snowmobile brands.
Worst 3 snowmobile
There are
brands?
only 3.
There's 4 actually. So we'll get to the best one here by eliminating the worst 3.
All right.
Am I even aware of the 4th one? You know, it's funny because people are always like, oh, what's the best snowmobile? I've been forever a Ski-Doo guy. And in Chile, we ride mostly Polarises, and I've been converted. So I currently own a Ski-Doo, but I prefer Polaris right now.
Right.
I've spent minimal time on Arctic Cat. So, you know, I'm less likely to ride an Arctic Cat than less likely to ride a Ski-Doo, even though that's what I own right now. And my favorite one is Polaris.
Right, and you didn't even know that Yamaha made snowboarders.
Yeah, that's right. I do, but
in denial, like
I
most
haven't
people.
seen many Yamahas lately.
No, and you probably right not to.
Yeah.
Yes.
How you know, it's interesting to me. I mean, I know both of you guys are avid snowboarders, and I've known both of you guys a long time. I don't get to see you guys that much, but it's really cool to see you guys doing this podcast and see that you're still passionate about snowboarding. And
Alaska.
Where does the drive come from to do the podcast?
Ooh, we got a reverse question here.
Just you know, I'm always trying to push you know, what I can do with the media in snowboarding, and so I've been involved with the media and snowboarding basically since I was a teenager, and so this is a new way to contribute kind of my voice in just a different direction.
Right. I think I've always enjoyed snowboarding and talking about snowboarding. I follow it quite a bit, and Mark and I obviously have had a ton of fun. I guess just doing things over the years with, like, whether it's Tailgate Alaska, whether it's shredding around Sun Valley here, or, you know, just hanging out and shooting the shit. And I was like, you know, and I've been listening to a lot of podcasts, probably more podcasts than music lately. And I think over a conversation on the porch at the hot water over the summer, we said, why aren't we doing something like this, you know?
Right.
So I think it has been really fun to get together every week and, you know, create something that reinvigorates my love for the sport. You know, not that I don't love snowboarding. It's just sometimes you just need to hear those other perspectives to get that. And I have appreciated that. I've learned probably more about snowboarding in the last 3 months than I have in the last 10 years, you know, and it excites me doing this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So.
Plus I always listened to NPR growing up. So I was into like that kind of intelligent talk radio kind of thing.
Right.
So,
yeah, I think it's really neat you guys are doing, and something that the community could totally benefit from.
well, hopefully
I got
we have
a
some good
guest
ones.
coming in right now.
Oh, you have a guest at the
yeah,
hot water?
Yeah,
in,
I got
huh?
a guest at the hot water. Why don't you keep going? I'll go get the guest, or you can.
Okay. I'll keep going. 3 pros that you looked up to, like mentors, back when you were coming up, guys who kind of took you under their wing and kind of showed you the ropes a little bit.
Yeah, definitely MFM. Learned so much watching that guy work, you know, like he's true professional on so many levels. So I learned a lot from him. Kurt Wastel was one that, like, I looked up to before I met him. And when I met him, you know, they always say, like, don't meet your heroes, right?
Right.
Well, that didn't apply with Kurt. Meeting him, he was even more of a hero. Like, that dude is solid, really good person.
Yeah.
And for a third one, probably Shane Charlebois. You know, he's always been a good friend. He's a legendary snowboarder. I think he's one of the most passionate snowboarders around. He really is into bringing people up into snowboarding, through snowboarding, finding more snowboarders, giving people opportunities.
Right.
I think he's one of the most true snowboarders out there.
Okay. So how about 3 movies like that you would have on repeat as you were coming up?
Oh, yeah. For sure, I watched Decade like so much. TB4, tons.
Yeah.
And The Resistance.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Those are probably my 3 favorite all-time shred videos.
Okay. How about 3 best trips you've been on for snowboarding?
3 best trips for snowboarding. I think getting to go to Australia as a young snowboarder was really cool, because that was my first experience of getting to snowboard on the Southern Hemisphere and realizing that it's something that you can do year round. So while
the toilet's flushed backwards.
Yeah. So while it's not like this epic location for snowboarding, just seeing that you can do it year round, and also seeing the Aussies' passion for riding. And it's funny how they actually have really amazing riders there, because they all travel to the Northern Hemisphere to ride, and then they go home and ride during their winter. So they're putting a lot of time on snow. So that was my first international trip. So that one sticks out in my mind. Getting to go to South America with Marco and Shane and Forrest changed my life. It's what I think really did give me the opportunity to transition into guiding. That trip specifically, and getting to experience like a different culture and going to the Southern Hemisphere to ride. And then going to Haines, Alaska to ride with Wyatt and work on this levitation project was a super memorable trip. I think that was one of the first times where I really started getting to free ride lines in Alaska.
Hey folks, if you're tuning in to us still, please take a minute to go to Patreon.
Wait.
What?
Is there like some question that they wouldn't still be tuning in?
Well, if they're still listening, they can go to patreon.com/the Project.
But you're still staying still.
Still.
Like
they might have just listened to the first
far.
5 minutes. Yeah, they might not have made it this far. So.
Okay.
But I just want, if you're still listening, okay, if you're listening, go to patreon.com/the Project, and we're going to count on you guys to support an independent voice in snowboarding media. It's how we're going to keep this thing advertising free and have a voice that is not affected by the advertisers.
If life wasn't, didn't push you into being a professional snowboarder and a guide, what would you hope your life would have been? What would you be doing instead of snowboarding?
Car detailing.
Hopefully not car detailing. Probably working with my hands in some way though, some construction or something like that. Figure I'm not that good at sitting down at the desk. That's for sure.
Right.
Okay.
Right. I figured it was something like motorcycles or something.
Yeah, mechanic for sure.
Yeah.
That's, I like working on cars and motorcycles. Definitely something with my hands.
Okay, sure. 3 favorite motorcycles ever.
3 favorite ever motorcycles.
Yes.
So my first motorcycle was a TY80 76 Yamaha Trials bike. So that's probably my favorite one because it's the first one I got to ride.
Right.
I really like the old Indian bikes. Those are pretty cool. And then my dirt bike that I have right now, my 500 Husky.
Is that a snow bike as well?
Snow bike as well. That was why I got it. I mean, if it was just going to be a dirt bike, it'd be a smaller bike, but it needs to live 2 lives for me right now. So
I
got the big dog.
That is the big dog, huh? 4-stroke 500.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you ever find that like those are underpowered, like the snow bikes? Like, how would you characterize snow bike versus snowmobile?
Yeah,
which do you like more?
Yeah, it's funny. I have some friends that just battle over this, and one's super pro snow bike and one's really pro snowmobile, and they love to talk shit to each other. But they're just 2 different tools, The snow bike can get into places, and we use them a lot of times to help crack into new zones because you can more easily get through tight areas and figure terrain out on a snow bike. It lives in a side hill,
right?
So while I'm continually getting better at snowmobiling all the time, the snow biking is easy. I mean, if you know how to ride a motorcycle and a snowmobile, you're going to jump on a snow bike and destroy instantly. They're super easy to ride. So it's just a different tool. A snow bike cannot go straight up a face. It's got to do switchbacks. A
Right.
snowmobile, you can just hammer it and go straight up a face. So they're just completely different tools.
Do you have more fun snow biking, snowmobiling, splitboarding, or heliing, or riding a ski lift?
It's really funny. Like, I would say that a lot of my days off lately, I'm probably snowmobiling and snow biking. And it's not that I don't totally love snowboarding still. It's just I'm automatically snowboarding 4 to 5 days a week without even thinking about it.
Right.
You know, and even if I have guests, it doesn't mean that it's not fun. So I think for me, it's all about getting a variety of things so that I don't get burnt out on one particular thing. Like, for example, I love to splitboard, and I've been splitboarding a lot in the early season here because we don't have very good coverage for motorized access, and it's reminded me how much I love splitboarding and just the piece of using your own energy to get up the mountain and being in a quiet place, and you can carry on conversations with your buddies while you're hiking along. So there's things I appreciate about all those activities, and it would be hard for me to say that one's better than the other. You know, one thing I truly appreciate about splitboarding is its simplicity. You can get to amazing places. You don't need to spend thousands and thousands of dollars on some motorized machine and gas and oil and all the maintenance. It's very simple, and you can have some amazing adventures with it.
Yeah, now that they have the dedicated splitboard bindings, getting that thing back together is so much easier.
Yeah. And it has changed so much, you know.
Yeah.
And it absolutely, a splitboard doesn't ride like a normal snowboard. That's for sure.
Right.
You know. And then that's where having the mechanized access helps you to be on that normal board if that's what you so desire.
Right. Okay. So when do you go to Japan here in a couple of weeks, and then you're there for the month of January, and then Silverton after that?
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's a little change up for me this season.
Are you going to guide in Japan? What are you going to do there?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to be as familiar with the terrain, you know.
Sure.
So we're going to go a few days before the guests show up. I'll do some terrain familiarization, but yeah, I'll be guiding.
Who are you doing that with?
With Stellar Adventures.
Okay. So they bring over guests and groups of 4 or 5, something like that?
Yeah. I think we've got, probably like 15 to 20 people coming. So we'll have, 3 or 4 groups going.
Do skiers ever get bummed out when they see their guide is on a snowboard?
Oh, I get it all the time. Like I said, I'm mostly guiding skiers, hence my funny vocabulary. But I all the time I'll start with my group in the morning and start my safety talk, and they glance down at my boots, and I kind of see their facial expression change.
Oh, he doesn't know what he's doing, obviously.
Sometimes I say something, sometimes I don't. But I typically find by the end of the day they aren't thrown off. Usually,
Just 8 hours later, just takes 8 hours, and everything's good.
I mean It's really funny how, especially in this guiding or snow professional world, how there's still a lot of old school thought of these snowboarders can't get around,
Right.
And I think a lot of ski patrol people have been exposed to a lot of intermediate to beginner snowboarders and not that many advanced riders.
I've been exposed to a lot of intermediate and beginner ski patrollers. So there you go.
Yeah.
Right.
So there's definitely a stigmatism, and I think early on in my guiding days, I was like, I gotta prove that we can do this, and and now I'm not about that. It's a waste of my energy. I don't need to prove anything. I just want to be sure people have fun, and that's it.
Okay. Do you ever play tricks on your skier buddies?
I probably should.
Yeah, you should.
Yeah.
I mean, this is take a little surfboard wax, rub it on the bottom of Reggie's skis. One of his skis, maybe.
We definitely, if you leave your backpack around and don't pay attention to it, you might find some rocks in the bottom of it or that kind of thing.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
Especially at 14,000 feet, 13.5.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. And sometimes they don't notice for a long time, or an old rotten piece of food or something like that. That's a good one too.
Okay. I'll have to work on that. Some practical jokes for the backcountry.
Looking back on your life in snowboarding and what it is up to this point, what has been the most, I guess, fulfilling thing that you've learned, or that thing that you just about your life? Maybe it's about yourself or something that you've learned, I guess.
Well, I think everything I know about life I've learned through snowboarding in a lot of ways, you know. I mean, it's made me more humble. I've learned like through injuries about nutrition and fitness, and I just feel like I owe so much to snowboarding. It's been my life.
Right.
Yeah. It's how I've interpreted the world.
We should probably just end it there, huh?
Right. I think that's a pretty good ending.
Well, hey, thank you so much for coming down here and taking the time. Not only, you know, but you were heading down to Salt Lake. Thank you for taking the time to sit down with us and talk.
Thank you.
I'm honored to be here.
Right on.
I feel super fortunate.
Right.
Cool. Thanks, man.
On behalf of Mark Sullivan and the Beeve, thanks for listening to the Snowboard Project. Remember, ride fast, take chances, dream big, and take action. And for God's sake, don't be a... Don't forget to support advertising-free snowboarding media at patreon.com. The Snowboard Project. The Snowboard Project. The Snowboard Project.